Live here.
Live!
But we don't have to necessarily know what that means.
What's the someday of Black?
I don't
there's
know
a
that we
reason
want
this story happens now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the movie writes itself.
Ooh.
Well,
I'm still streaming. How do I stop streaming? No! Hello.
hello. Oh. So I'm trying something different today. There's this. Did you notice that there's a local recordings thing going on?
I did, yes.
It might make the quality of the videos better later. I honestly have no.
Well, I mean, like in terms of content, will I suddenly say better stuff? Here's hoping.
Here's hoping. Yes. Welcome Monday, February 13th, everyone. Ben and Jake Write a Movie, episode 65.
65. Wow, that was the number of the bus I used to get to school.
Wow, yeah.
It's a sign.
It's a sign. I don't know what it's a sign of, but it's a sign. I swear it is. 65 of these. It's great. Yeah. We've done I mean, if you take out all the shop talk and you take out the interviews, we've easily done just over a full week's worth
of work
on this.
Yeah.
Like a full week's worth.
Like that. Yeah.
What's that?
It really is interesting to break it down like that and go, oh, well, that's what a full week of work looks like.
That's what a full week of work looks like.
Yeah. In terms of hours input.
Right. Yeah, it's probably out of the 65 episodes, I'd say maybe it's probably like 50 hours of
maybe it's slightly more. But again, it's around that. A week and a half, maybe. Yeah. So, Yep, for sure.
So I'm sure there's an industry topic to talk about too, but I was thinking about just an interesting thing that has happened recently to us on a couple of different things. And we even touched on it in our interview last week with Charlie and Vloss. Anyone who didn't catch that interview, it's fantastic. So the episode's 1 hour and a half, but it's really, really, really good. For those who don't know, Vloss and Charlie Polypanades wrote Death Note on Netflix and also Blood of Zeus, their show. Immortals as well. And they're great. And they're so wise and kind and generous and knowledgeable. And it's a really good episode. So if you haven't seen it, do make sure you go and check that out after you watch this or listen to this. Yes, definitely. And one of the things that came up was this idea of ideas that we would have on older projects that then kind of blend into what you're working on at that moment. And part of it is sometimes going back and like legitimately just taking an old idea as we've talked about.
Knowing that you're doing so. Why don't we
knowing that you're doing it
and go and put that in here? Yeah.
And then sometimes it just happens and you go, oh, I didn't realize how close these two things are.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I kind of feel like it's your unconscious mind playing out stuff that's going on inside of it. Right. And I think what you and I have on a pretty consistent basis is we kind of glom onto things that we're both kind of feeling at the time. And we often say, oh, I'm so glad you said that because I'm feeling the same way. Right. So I think, we're in this kind of symbiotic relationship whereby we both kind of have these similar feelings and by like similar thematic ideas. I absolutely feel that when we first started working together, we were very much drawn to a certain type of hero in our pieces. And after a while, we would laugh because we began to identify, oh, this is another reluctant hero story. Oh, here we go again. A selfless character who's a reluctant hero over the course of the movie.
Selfish and selfless.
So that was a lot. I think probably about 3 or 4 movies we wrote that were that basically. Yeah. And then interestingly, as you the thing that I think you're probably referencing was we went back and revisited an old pitch last week and we're like, oh my goodness, there are elements of that in Hellfire, the project that we're working on right now.
Yes. And we had not read that pitch in 2.5 years. So it was funny because, obviously we said, and we did come to this podcast without knowing what we were going to write, but without consciously doing it, aspects from other movies
bleeded in. There's elements in this that we acknowledged earlier that we didn't even realize we were doing from another pitch that we had another script that we were going to write, a spec-ish that we had been talking about. And all of a sudden we were like, oh shit, we're like using a bunch of stuff from that. Or, you know, there's variations of different, whether it's structural, whether it's character, whether it's a specific set piece or a plot point or whatever, that you just kind of find like going through the course of like multiple projects.
Right.
And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I'm curious what you think in terms of like, is it okay for writers in general to have lots of movies or screenplays that would hopefully one day become movies with very similar like themes or characters or plots? Like, does
it's a good question, isn't it? It's a good question because one could argue, let's say you wrote 3 specs in a year and they all hit, and for whatever reason, they all hit the marketplace 1 month after the next, which can happen sometimes. And we've dealt with situations whereby we've gone, hang on a minute, is this going to be going out too close to this project? In theory, you know, people could read that script and go, oh, it's very similar thematically to the last thing that they had go out. You know, we are toying around with an idea at the moment that might live not necessarily thematically, but kind of conceptually to another movie that we've written. I think from a thematic place, I think you, the writer, we, the writers, see it much more kind of clearly than perhaps a reader does. And that a reader will be looking at concept first and movie first and thematic stuff as a secondary thought. You know, rather than saying, this is a movie about a reluctant hero, a reluctant, selfish hero who over the course of the movie becomes selfless. Well, that's just a film trope in general.
Yeah.
Name 100 movies that do that with heroes. So the answer is, in terms of thematic and character arc stuff, I don't think it is a problem.
Yeah, I don't think theme is an issue because that could just be, look, this writer likes to explore that part of the human condition, and that's okay. But I also wonder, and this is just kind of there is a part of Hollywood in general. And it goes beyond even screenwriters. I mean, you could look at actors and directors and people who Hollywood wants you to do the same but different, right? There's an aspect of going, oh, we've talked about brand a lot in the past, right? Oh, this is your brand. And it's something that our representation has brought up, which is like, give us another one of those. And you see actors playing very similar roles all the time. You see directors directing very similar types of movies. Now, one could say, well, that's just what they love to do. And one could argue that that's okay. I mean, I go, well, as long as the whole thing isn't literally exactly the same, is it okay to tell a very similar story with a few major differences that then influence the overall thing? But if you look at the two, you could gotta go, yeah, all right, they're kind of telling the same story here.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk a little bit sometimes about John Wick and Nobody, written both by our friend Derek Kolstad. And there are a lot of similarities between those movies. They're both excellent and individual in their own way, and obviously very different, but also structurally, you go, oh, there's a lot of things that feel like they're the same, you know? And I love both of those movies, you know?
That's the thing, is I go, you know, as creatives, I think things do slip in that you don't even consciously go, oh, this is the same as what I did before.
Right.
Should you fight against that? Or should you embrace it and go, actually, this is what I
do really well.
And I enjoy it, and I'm having fun doing it. So if there's a career to be had doing the same thing, but really enjoying doing it, be the guy who does those movies. I mean, I'll use, one of my favorite directors right now is Denis Villeneuve, and arguably he's the guy who does big, giant sci-fi that's beautifully shot and visually amazing.
A bit heady. Yeah.
And a bit heady. Yeah. Blade Runner 2049, it's Dune Parts 1 and Part 2, and you go,
it's Arrival.
It's Arrival, right? Sure. And so you go.
What's interesting is before that, he didn't do that. Before Arrival, he didn't do that. But yeah, I think at the moment he absolutely.
No, but I mean, like right now, yeah, like he's like, and when you talk about another. We're talking about a big sci-fi project, and the producer was like, well, there's only one Denis Villeneuve out there.
Right.
And you're like, well, yeah. But like, I mean, is that okay to then I mean, I think it's okay. I love watching his movies, and I would want to watch him do more of the same.
Yeah.
The stories aren't identical, obviously.
I think of what did he direct before Arrival? Was it Brothers? I forget the name of the movie, but there was it was like a really good drama. And I go, well, he segued from that into doing a really good drama that happened to be sci-fi.
I wonder what I'm blanking. I don't know the movie Brothers, so I couldn't.
Yeah, it might not have been, but it's something like that. But it was, really it's, he did a very, very good drama. Then did a very good drama that had an absolute science fiction thing going on with it. And then lent even more into the science fiction aspect when he did Blade Runner 2049. And then does
it was Sicario
with Dune. So it was like each time it was one more you just went straight from whatever that movie was. Did you find what
Sicario is what you're thinking of?
I think yes. Okay.
And there was also Prisoners and another movie.
Yeah. So those kinds of movies, great movies. Prisoners is a fantastic movie.
Right.
But then these worlds getting big. If you were to say, Dune from the director of Prisoners, you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
You go Dune from the director of Blade Runner and Arrival, you go, yeah, cool, got it. So anyway, bring that back to screenwriting. And we talk about this. So, and we, the way that we did it was with The Princess. The Princess was an interesting experiment for us because in the past, previously, we had our bread and butter, our brand was taking well-known IP, Santa Claus, Arabian Nights, H.G. Wells, things like that, and putting a spin on it. But the way we did it with The Princess was fairy tale princess. It was more done with a trope than it was an exact. And we're like, well, what if it's an action? What if it's an R-rated action movie? We hadn't written an R-rated action or sold an R-rated action movie before. This is a new thing. So it was that, and then it's that. And interestingly, our new project that we were outlining this morning does it even more. It's not Winter's Night, and it's not even The Princess, but it takes a concept that and does something fun in an action movie sense with it.
Yeah.
So one other thing that's actually furthest away from quote unquote our brand, and yet still fits our brand because of what we created with The Princess.
Sure.
I don't think you should go from writing a horror to a romantic comedy. But could you write a horror romantic comedy? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'll use an example of a friend of ours, the great John Spates, speaking soon.
Sure.
And now I haven't read anything that he sold actually as a spec, to be honest. But his resume, if you look at his resume, it's all big adaptation, science fiction, big worlds, big expense. I mean, literally, I guess. I guess Passengers was a spec, wasn't it?
Passengers was a fantastic spec.
Yeah. So, but then it's like Prometheus, Doctor Strange, you know, even The Mummy, Dune Part 2. Like, he's got a reputation, and a very good reputation, of being able to deliver on a specific kind of movie.
Yes.
And he would be one of the go-to writers if a studio is going, hey, we want to adapt this property. It's got a lot of world building, a lot of visual shit in there. It's a little heady. We definitely want it to feel smart and not like, you know, it's an adult movie. Who do we go to? Well, one of the first names that's going to come up is John's.
Totally.
You know, but that's because he's also been doing it now for a long time and stayed within that brand.
Totally.
You know, like,
and again, it's interesting, isn't it? And it's a slight diversion from the conversation, because that's now we're talking about branding.
Well, yes, but it's the way in which you come up with ideas. I don't think it's about theme. I think it's the way. I think it's more conceptual. I really do. I think it's about even the things that I was talking about earlier, whereby they were slipping into the movies that we were talking about, like even what we're working on now, Hellfire, and having things that were like, oh wow,
that's interesting.
It was less thematic than it is concept, plot, character. It's like the type of movie that it is, you know, and so I'm just going, hey, well, on the one hand, I think there's a version where you just go embrace it, and if things slip and blend, and oh, you have this great idea, oh well, it's very similar, but it's not the same, but it's very similar. That's okay.
I think that's okay. I think what one should be aware of, if you are exploring similar thematic ideas, is that you're not just falling into the groove that exists because you've already explored it in something else. I think if you can find way, like for example, you had a really great idea about the concept that we were talking about this morning. There was a really interesting twist that we didn't go into this knowing. You know, concept is this, and it's going to be this, and this is going to be the character way in. And then you were like last week, what if that character's the villain? And it was like, oh, that's great. And you didn't know that going into it at all. That's just an example. It's not the best example, but it's kind of going like, there are new discoveries to be made. Even if you're exploring similar thematic ideas, you can explore them in different ways and through different characters that do different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of talking about two different things. Like, I really don't think it's about thematic ideas. I think you can explore the same thematic idea in a bazillion different genres. You know, so it's not that. It's more about the style, tone, structure, like as you were saying before, like, you know, we were writing things that were, hey, let's take this thing and turn it into this thing, you know. Someone once called it subversive badassery. You know, and I think that there is, and we continue to be pushed to continue it within that. And that is, yes, it's brand, but it's only brand because the ideas that we generate start to blend into each other because they're all kind of doing the same thing.
Of course, absolutely.
You know, oh, hey, you're the guy that writes about, you know, you're like gritty crime dramas. Give me another gritty crime drama. Well, gritty crime dramas have tropes. A lot of them are the same. There's only so many ways you can skin the cat. And while you might create a completely new character in a different city, and maybe it's going to be like, you know, a different time period or a different that, you'll probably end up having moments eventually that blend over your story.
Sure.
You know, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is going like, oh, well, if you're talking about taking a some sort of genre trope and flipping it on its head, or if you're talking about taking something and doing something different with it, well, they tend to be similar. Like, we've even talked about this in terms of, well, how do we make them a badass? Well, that's the same.
Yeah, that's the same. Totally, absolutely right.
Same kind of gimmick in a way.
Absolutely. Totally right. How do you make Santa Claus a badass? How do you make a fairy tale princess a badass? How do you make a badass?
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's just an interesting thing and then as you write those stories, obviously, I think that you want to try and keep them as fresh and as new as possible. I think as a writer, like you said, it's like you go, ooh, that would be cool. That would be different. We haven't seen that before. We're always looking for those moments.
Yeah.
And then there's also things that just work. And they work because they work.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to do a character and you're going to subvert this nice character and make them into a badass, you're going to want to have certain moments that give us the thing that's going to allow that to happen.
Sure.
So anyway, it's interesting to look at the couple of specs that we're working on right now, and even just thinking about it from a business perspective, going, is that good for a career?
Right.
And I would argue it can be.
But
also, I guess, could not be if what you're writing is like too similar all the time.
Yeah.
Although there's probably people with amazing careers who write the exact same type of movie every single time. Like literally like paint by numbers.
Yeah.
I couldn't call them out right now, but we all see those movies, right? We all go, oh, like this movie feels exactly like that movie, which feels exactly like that movie. And you just literally, it's like paint by numbers movies.
Sure.
And
you don't want that.
You don't want that.
No. And again, counterpoint is, if those movies sell and people enjoy those movies, then
well, that's exactly what I mean.
The way up, isn't it?
Exactly what I mean. Like, is that such a bad thing?
Yeah.
Be able to have a career as a screenwriter and enjoy painting by numbers?
Sure.
I don't know. I mean, like, maybe it's not the most artistically fulfilling.
Well, and again, there's one thing, isn't there? It's like, if it is quote unquote painting by numbers, and now's the scene where I think why there's been so much rejection of things like the Save the Cat structure, for example, is because people go, well, that just feels like painting by numbers. But when you watch a lot of movies, you go, well, a lot of these things do get met. I don't think they were looking at Save the Cat structure when they wrote them, but I think what Blake Snyder, who wrote Save the Cat, was doing was trying to identify those things.
Well, there's common things about stories. Stories have
common things about stories.
Yeah.
And yet I don't like going and writing that list out, which is something perhaps we did in our early career, writing that list out and going, well, this needs to happen here. There needs to be a thing that happened here. But do we talk about darkest moments in stories? Yes. Absolutely. Of course we do. Because those are things that happen in all good movies. There is a moment where, quote unquote, all is lost. And you go, how are they going to get out of this one?
Yeah.
Those things happen in all the best movies.
Right.
Because
it's funny too, because dealing as a professional screenwriter, you're working with other people. Obviously, it's a collaborative art. You're working with producers, and we were just having a great call with a producer the other day, very successful producer, who was talking about, well, I always look at structure and I always try and find that darkest moment point. Yeah. And then he was saying, but he talked to this other incredible producer who told him actually the way he's like, I make movies based on midpoints.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's fascinating. Like, they're looking at it also from, well, we need something to happen here that is the same. as what normally happens in these kinds of movies.
Sure.
At the middle of the movie, the character needs to make a turn whereby they start to go on, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And they found that works.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
And ultimately, I think what's interesting about storytelling, and they say that there's the old line, it's like there are no new stories.
Yeah.
Right? There's only variations on the same. I can't remember what it's like 10 stories or something like that.
I have a great book by Christopher Booker called The 7 Basic Plots.
Right. And I think that's the same thing. It's like when you're writing all the time and you're coming up with new ideas all the time, stuff is going to naturally blend from one project to the other because there's only so many stories to tell. There's only so many ways to tell them. You're pretty much always going to have a midpoint, and you're pretty much always going to have some form of a all is lost.
Because it's about how you keep the audience engaged. Oh, here's something new. Here's a new piece of information. Oh, it's now gotten even harder. You don't want to be like, and then it was really easy at the end of Act 2, and then there was nothing that they were really going for in Act 3 because it doesn't make sense. You need to have constant stakes. Again, in book writing, there is the belief that and like people like Dan Brown absolutely do this. Cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. Like, oh, how is he going to get out of this one? And dates back to the old serials of the 1940s and 50s. That's why they're called cliffhangers. Because the movie would end, the episode would end with a character hanging on to the edge of a cliff. Tune in next week to find out if Flash Gordon can get out of this one.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, I do think that can be creatively unfulfilling to paint by numbers and fall into those own things. But what you will find, and we absolutely find, is regardless of whether or not we're quote unquote painting by numbers, which I don't think we ever do, but we do find natural beats occurring because you want certain things to be happening. And someone can zoom out and go, well, you're just doing the movie structure. And you go, yeah, because I'm writing a movie.
Yeah. You're just doing that. Yes, I am. You're right.
You're just writing a screenplay.
You're right. I have a protagonist. You got me. You got me. Wait, there's a villain in that movie.
You're just copying that because you read that in some book.
You're right. I have villains in my movies. So unoriginal.
Damn you.
Anyway. All right. Speaking of villains and movies, actually, I don't think we're talking villains, but we are going to go into our movie now, unless there's anything else.
No.
Discuss.
So
let's talk. It's been a weekend. We always have to kind of catch up, right?
We had a weekend. Yeah.
What is?
And we didn't work on it on Friday because we were.
It's actually been even longer. Yeah.
All right. So Thursday. So, we were. I can't fully remember, but I believe we were talking about Hank.
So we talked about Hank. Actually, we moved past that. What we have is, and I'll read the note that we have about Hank. So Hank, we decided, knows Lilith from 20 years ago. He's the younger Jeff Bridges. He's a demon hunter. He hunted her, but now they came to a truce. Now she needs his help because Zod is onto them. They need somewhere to hide, and Hank is their best shot. Yeah. Hank, in this version, does not come into the story until Act 2. So we are taking him completely out of Act 1, and he is the stop that they end up going to along the way.
That was an interesting example of us both having different ideas about what we felt was right for Hank and coming up with a third idea. You were like, I really think he should arrive in Act 1, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know, maybe he's there, he's following them. We didn't agree on the best version of it, and then a third version was put forward, which was, well, let's make him an ally and let's meet him in Act 2. And that was a really interesting compromise that I think is another way of doing it. And again, it's just an example of continually, again, us being in a partnership, different ideas about the way things that something should be, and going, well, what's neither of these things? What if it's this instead?
Right.
Yeah.
So, well done. So let's open this outline up, because I think we are at a point where we're going to have to talk about some of these new scenes and how to structure out the rest of this Act 1.
Yeah.
And something I've been thinking about, although it might not be a big deal, but it is something that's on my mind, is our antagonist, is our villain plot. And do we are we waiting too long to bring him back, I guess? Is partly my question, but I'm not sure. I don't feel certain about it.
Let's have a little look at what we have right now, just kind of retouching on the scenes from the other day. So we're in Sam's house. So Sam's had this big kind of emotional moment of her husband leaving, and she goes nuts, and she releases this shockwave that indicates that her soul is now connected to the soul of the Antichrist, and the Antichrist is now on his or her way.
A white horseman.
White horseman. So we're interior Sam's house, dawn. Sam wakes up. She hit her head. She goes to take Advil for both her headache and her hangover. She itches the back of her neck. There's a mark there. The beginnings of the mark of Cain is there. That wasn't there before. We see it. She doesn't. She texts her husband, Larry, I'm sorry, let's talk. At the same time, approximately the same time, we're in Lilith's apartment with her also waking. She, this is where we left off, has had some kind of vision.
Yeah, and we're talking about how does this work?
How does this work? The question we asked at the end of this document here is, visions, are they specific to Lilith? Has she had them before? So this is about how Lilith puts the pieces together about knowing Sam is important so she can go there.
Yeah, and the question that I had asked was, well, if she has them, does that mean all demons have them? And I don't think that's what we want.
No, I don't think that's what we want.
So then why does she have it specifically? And is that like the other thing was, well, so are demons different? Are there different kind, like, does she have visions and that's her aspect of demonhood, whereas other demons are uniquely different? But then do we have to establish that earlier? Do we have to see her have a vision earlier? Also, is there, just to talk through it, is there another way for Lilith to know where the white horseman is arriving, since she was a horseman herself?
Yeah.
That isn't that. Or another alternative, which is just the horsemen have visions when their brethren arrive. It makes me think a little bit of the Old Guard. So in the Old Guard, when a new immortal shows up, they all have these kind of visions. They're all not. In fact, it's very similar. As I'm talking about it, is like they kind of get like hit by a bit of a, oh my God, something happened and I know it.
Yeah.
If this is specific to the horsemen, and there's only 3 of them, although there's a new horseman that's taking over Lilith's spot.
Yeah.
Is it about whatever it is that makes them into one of the horsemen?
Yeah.
That connects them in this way.
So that's absolutely that's probably the version we'll end up going with.
We'll talk through it.
Yeah. I don't think, again, like the other version in my mind is you go to go back to something we talked about in terms of prophecy, but then everyone knows the prophecy, and you could have easily put the pieces together. Ultimately, what we're looking for, particularly as we enter into the climax of Act 1, is both hero and villain converging on Sam at the same time. They've both figured it out, just like in the Terminator. They've both done their tracking. They arrive at the same time. Conflict.
Right. Exactly.
But that's what we're looking for. So they can't all just know where it's going to happen when it happens. There needs to be we didn't know this yesterday. Today we know. Today I know you're called Sarah Connor.
When that shockwave goes out, in theory, they all, if they all got the same level of knowledge in that moment, well, they'll all have to put those pieces together, and in theory, it could take the same amount of time for all of them to do it.
Yes,
thus,
and it will do. They're going to arrive,
and they'll end up colliding. Lilith will get there just a little bit before because she's our hero and smarter.
Yeah.
She's also has less distance to travel. They're coming from the underworld, and she just has to come from Colorado. So there is less.
Yeah, the traffic's easier from Colorado.
The traffic's not as fast.
Honestly, I tell you, coming from the underworld during rush hour, I mean,
fucking nightmare.
Worse than Los Angeles.
Right. But like, I would buy that if they look without even needing to explain it, and that's the key, right? We don't want to have to explain it. We just want it to feel like it is.
Yes.
No one ever explains why, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, why Kyle Reese and Arnold Schwarzenegger show up on the same day, or how they basically like determined that this was going to be the day where they were both going to arrive to fucking get Sarah Connor. Totally. But we just assume, and that's okay. It's like we just go, oh, okay, they're both here for her, and so blank.
Right.
They knew that. I don't know, maybe, Reese, I think they do show in one, maybe, is it a special edition or something where they show them like show up at like the term, the facility.
I think it was in one of the sequels.
One of the sequels, like they show, they see that that's where they've gone and that's how they decide. But in the first movie, they don't address it. And it's okay.
That's what they should have done. Kyle, in fact, to make a great comedy short, Kyle Reese turns up, arrives at Sarah Connor's place, and the police are all there and like, oh no, he was here last week. And you're like, no, roll credits.
You were 2 hours too late.
Oh, man. Son of a bitch.
Oh, time travel. Such a mind fuck. Always. But I think that if we go...
I think the easiest way, not just not the easiest way, I think the right way in this is They all have visions.
They all have visions, and it's because they're the horsemen, and thus these visions will lead them to her. They're bringing them to their fourth brother sister. Yeah, their fourth. Absolutely. Their fourth them. Totally. Non-binary. Their fourth non-binary horseman.
Non-binary person. Yes. Great. So then the question then again, I don't think we have to go into has she had them before. Any of this needs to be explained. They have visions.
She just has visions.
They have visions. Oh.
So she wakes, but she has had visions.
Yes.
And we were saying, does she immediately go and start sketching them?
I think it's cool.
And then when she's at the bookstore, she's still sketching. Yeah. She hasn't figured out what it is yet.
Yeah. Okay. She's got sheafs of paper. She doesn't know what they mean.
Or is it just repetitive? Can we just see her pull herself off the floor? What the fuck was that? And when she's at the bookstore, she's in the back office and she's just, as written, just going to town. And they're like, are you okay? And we just go, oh. She's like, I just woke up this morning and I just couldn't get this image out of my head.
Yeah.
Like.
And then, I think that's great. And then how then does she discover that that's Portland or is linked to Portland?
Because one of her visions said Portland in it.
It said Portland on it. Great. Fantastic.
It literally said Portland.
Said Portland. What could it mean? Where is the Antichrist? Well,
Portland.
You know what that sign? Her colleague comes in. You know what that looks like? That looks like Portland.
I think, one of the things, I mean, that's actually quite funny, but again, without explaining it, if she's got visions of landscapes, of a house, of a car, of this woman, of and we recognize a moment, and it's like the moment in the sketch of Sam watching her kids run away, like drive away. It's this weird sketch of like the car pulling out with a child's face and her and this woman going, nah, and we go, or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Something like that. Or again, is it?
I don't know whether it's visions that are, I don't know what the visions actually are, but I feel like they should be,
they are about leading. They are, yes. Are they things that Sam has witnessed and experienced that day? Are they, or is it stuff that's in or around her home? Is it the logo for her law firm? Is it
the reason I go towards the night? The reason I go towards the night is because I go towards the shockwave and the thing that led to that, and that essentially the energy is the emotion that is brought forth the White Horseman.
Totally. But the important from a story aspect is she looks at these pictures and goes, oh, this is where I need to go, or somehow gets that information. A child being led away in a car doesn't give that. A street sign does, or a landmark does, or something like that does that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say we can't have that, but again, it's like then there is an important piece of information that comes from this vision that makes Sam go, not Sam, Lilith go, I got to get on a plane. I got to get on the next plane to Portland. The fourth horseman is here. I've got to stop it.
I mean, I don't think here. So here's my problem with the visions that are literally of Portland.
Yes.
It feels so non-specific.
I agree.
Random. It's like, why the fuck would she have visions of them?
Yeah.
But if she is having visions, and maybe they're not of the night before, maybe they start from the moment that the mark shows up. So like you're saying, she's having a vision and it's almost as if she's looking through Sam's eyes and she's looking out the view of her law firm.
Starbucks. She's in a Starbucks.
I mean, she's drawing these, right? We're not going to go into her mind and actually see them.
No.
So if they're the kinds of thing where it is, I'm holding, the drawing always from this kind of like, I'm in traffic going to work and I am on a bridge because I live in the suburbs.
Absolutely.
I'm in an office tower looking out, and what do I see around me? There's a Mount Hood in the distance, or whatever it is,
Sure.
Like, but all from like
that's actually good. That's actually good. Something like Mount Hood is really good. You can see that from a lot of Portland.
So like, but like specifically, I'm somehow psychically linked to the fourth horseman in some way.
Okay, so let's just discuss that for a second, because I don't want to create problems later on.
Sure.
Because if Lilith is connected to her and can see elements through her eyes, and we're saying the other horsemen can as well, is that going to become a problem later on, whereby our horsemen are able to, or is that something that we can use to make practical?
I would say it does become a problem, but in a good way. I think it creates another level of tension and obstacle, actually, that we don't necessarily have right now, in a way that will make things feel even more urgent and desperate, and yet allow for some fun things. For example, if I know that I can see through your eyes, I'm going to blindfold you.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, it's
and think about the conflict that then creates between Lilith and Sam. You fucking blindfolded me, or put a bag over my head like a fucking hostage, and threw me in the back of the car as we drove away. Or I put you in a trunk, or I put you, like, remember, if all I can see is through your eyes, which I actually, the more I'm talking through this, I kind of like it because it feels cool and fresh. If I'm looking through your eyes, if all of a sudden I have a psychic link to the horseman, right? But it's not, I can't like read your thoughts or hear your voice. I'm just seeing visions that are as if they're through your eyes. Well, a lot of what we look at is so non-specific, it wouldn't matter. It's only the things that we look at that are specific. As you were just saying, watching a car pull out of a driveway is not going to lead anyone to her. Looking out her office window and seeing Mount Hood might. So it creates two things. One, if she looks at something that Zod or one of the other or his second horseman or third horseman see that is specific, it puts them right back on their trail. And also, it makes it so that she really needs to be careful. Plus, when they go to Hank's, they'll be safe because there's nothing that she can look at in there that is going to lead them anywhere. You know, he's in a bunker.
Yeah, I just don't want to have in any way Lilith's behavior to be perceived as being stupid. If she knows that Zod can see through Sam's eyes, even if it's just flashes of images, and you're gonna see a highway sign or whatever, you know, I would blindfold her the entire way. I would explain to her why we're doing it. The enemy can see through your eyes. I'm really sorry. This is the way it has to be, and that's not gonna.
I don't think it makes her. If they stop in a gas station, for example, or if they stop and she needs to go to the bathroom, how is going to the bathroom being in a restroom?
Yeah, no, totally. That wouldn't be.
There might be an accident though where something does tip them off, and that's the tension. Yeah, sure. There are moments. Look, I can't keep you blindfolded as my hostage and expect you to trust me. I can't. How am I supposed? You can't. Why would I trust you? You know, and
well,
maybe
but then the question becomes again going to this aspect of what Lilith wants. Why does she need Sam to trust her? This is the Antichrist. This is the bringer of all doom and darkness. Why do I care about Sam's feelings?
Well, I'm not killing her, so clearly I care.
Yeah, no, right. But I also care
Otherwise,
about.
I could just care. I could just kill her and we'd be done.
You know.
But if I didn't care, I'd literally I'd kill her. We'd be done. The movie would be over.
Of course, so, but it's not about I care about your feelings. Not about I need you to trust me. It's.
How do you know how is she going to accomplish reversing anything or figuring out anything or getting away and not falling into the hands of Zod if she doesn't trust her? I mean, that's not something that I think needs to be explained at all. I think we can all just kind of assume that Lilith needs her to trust her in order for. I mean, you could say the same thing about Kyle Reese, right? Why do I need Sarah Connor to trust me? I could just fucking knock her over the head, throw her over my shoulder, and get her away. Because that's not the story we're telling.
Yeah.
Lilith wants to be a good person. She wants to be human. Her desire, her internal desire, would never let her treat her like a demon would treat her.
Okay, let's try it. I'm just nervous about it being, you know, if they know that the enemy has this ability as well. I don't want to get to Act 2 and go, why don't they just blindfold her? You know,
why? I mean,
at this moment she trusts him. They know she's not going to do it, and yet I don't want Sam blindfolded with a bag over her head. I don't want that.
No.
You know? And yet, nor do I.
Back for a second, though. Why would it stop?
It wouldn't stop.
That's what I'm saying. No, yeah. I'm walk it back to how they found her in the first place.
Yeah.
Why does it stop?
I'm not arguing that it does stop.
Are you? Then what are you arguing for?
What I'm
not have the power at all
is after Sam does trust her and they're on the same side together, why don't they just put a bag over her head and say, if if we don't do this, they're going to find where we are. Sorry, Sam.
I mean,
and Sam goes, you know what? You're right. I trust you now.
Well, a simple answer to that is they do put a blindfold over her when we are not in a scene that's important. And when we are in a scene that's important, we're in a place where she doesn't need to wear the blindfolds.
Okay.
So if we're watching them drive, she has a sleeping mask over her eyes.
Right.
And if we're watching them have a meal, it's in a place that she's parked that's nondescript, that she's brought to-go food, and they're sitting in the back of a wherever that no one could tell where they are, because we make Lilith smart in that way. Or there's also ways to like fake someone out and sit in front of a movie,
and there could be fun ways of doing that. We're going to fake them out as to where we are. We can decide. I don't think it's like, I can close my eyes and see exactly what she's seeing.
No.
I think it's more haphazard than that.
I think it's the same as what we're getting right now, which is just flashes. Essentially, it's as if the energy of the horseman is calling to us to come and get them.
Yes, sure.
I'm not the one doing it.
Yeah.
It's not I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to, like a psychic, and try and look through your eyes.
Yeah.
That's not the power.
That's not it. Yeah, and I think it's just being clear about that. I have things
means we have to be careful, because we don't know what he'll see.
You know what it is? It's like in the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report.
Yeah, Minority Report's a great example.
They have stuff, and it's like, I can't really make sense of it, but what's that? It's but they don't have the ability to do that. They have the ability to stop and freeze the vision,
Right. But even if they and here's the other thing. Let's say they're having visions. Well, I'm on a time clock anyway. I'm moving. We're not sitting around waiting for them.
Totally.
I got to reverse this before the fucking Mark of Cain shows up. And she becomes the White Horseman. We're on the move, and so do we take precautions? Sure.
Yeah.
We also know, and one of the things that we can do, which I think can be interesting, is through the way in which we depict how Lilith has these visions now, will give us a sense for how much depth and detail do they have.
Absolutely.
Sometimes some visions might feel really detailed, and some visions might be completely amorphous.
Yes, great. Yeah, cool. Great.
I think that we need enough here, and this is, I think, where it needs to start. I would almost go, is there a way for us to have Lilith wake up? She's got a fucking headache.
Yeah.
She goes, she sits, which is weird, first of all, because I don't even know that demons get headaches. But she's she wakes up, she's sits down, and she's gonna either eat something or drink something, or let's say she has a cup of coffee and it's got milk, and with the spoon, she doesn't even know why she's doing it.
Yeah,
she starts to create a design in the fucking foam of her milk.
Yeah, totally, for sure. Yes.
And she's like, oh, fuck. Yes. And she knows what the visions mean.
And it's the mountain from
it's
mountains of the third kind.
Yes. Yeah, right. But it's not enough yet. So that's why she still goes to the bookstore. It's she doesn't know when the next vision's going to come.
Yeah, totally. That's great. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, awesome. So Lilith also wakes.
It is killing her.
Yeah.
She makes coffee.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
While sitting at the table, starts to zone out.
And she looks down. She's drawn something in the foam. That's cool. That's really cool. She's made a mountain of mashed potatoes.
Sure. In the foam. It's of a vision. And she now knows something bad is going down.
Right.
Oh shit!
We cut the next scene. This isn't it anymore. This is Interior's Bathroom Nights from an old version of the album.
Wait, we don't want to cut the this though.
What does the note say?
That's just our Hank note. I'm just
right, okay, fine. Yeah, cool. All right, so we're losing that scene there, but we can go to bookstore.
We can.
Yeah.
Yep. So here's the next question. She's getting a vision.
Yeah.
Sam, do we need to? I feel like we need to cut to Sam going to work so that when she has the vision of her in the office, we then can put 2 and 2 together.
Totally. Yes. Okay, great.
Sam is at work looking out the window, and she's here in the bookstore,
and she's like,
excuse me for a second. She runs into the back, starts to draw really quickly.
Okay, you know? Cool. Awesome. Okay, so interior, Sam's office, day, whatever.
What was the last thing that we saw? She woke up.
She took some Advil. She texted Larry.
Right. Okay. So she should come into the office like sunglasses on, hungover. She gets, you know.
Yeah.
Sam comes in. She's late.
Yeah.
She's late, hungover, with sunglasses covering her eyes.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to talk to anyone, especially the guy she was on a date with last night.
Absolutely right. For sure. Yeah.
And then she goes into her office. So this is actually like in her private office, basically. You know, and we'll relabel this, but I'm going to go Sam's office. You know, private.
Yeah.
Day. Sam stares out
the window.
Mount Hood can be seen in beyond the city.
Right. At the same time, Interior Bookstore Day, there's in the back room.
She's not in the back room yet. Lilith
in the front
at the front like at the cashier.
Yeah.
Has a moment is like in the middle of conversation with the cashier and goes, sorry, I gotta go. I'll be right
totally.
back.
Yeah, and she just starts drawing. Right.
Is in conversation with the cashier when she stops abruptly. It
would be really fun if she just grabbed the book off the shelf and just started drawing inside the book. She's like,
grabbing a book along the way, a book along the way. Sure. And then in the back room,
she's just start drawing this thing. Yeah. Great. I love that. That's really fun. That's really fun.
Lilith sketches furiously. It's the view.
Yeah. Awesome. Super fun. Good stuff. That's great.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Yay. Love
That's
it.
Good. We'll wrap up in a moment. Danger Crew Monarch on YouTube says, "Oh man, I find these videos fascinating and y'all are up to writing pages. I'm locked in. Outline pages. So yeah, we're close. But yeah, thanks so much for all
thanks, man. Or man, woman. Danger Crew Monarch.
Danger Crew Monarch. Sounds like a guy.
We never know.
We never know.
I mean, I guess monarch is a women can be monarchs. Yeah.
Women can be monarchs. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
All right. Today. It's really fun. This is absolutely an aspect that's like a really fun thing.
Yeah.
These visions.
Yeah. Anything we need to mark down so that we know what's going on. So essentially what we're saying is Zod and other horsemen, I'm just going to write this down for a minute, are having similar visions. Now, I don't think we ever have to explain this, but I completely understand why Lilith would get there first, because Lilith lives on Earth and probably knows these things after 100 years better than Zod, who only comes up to the surface every so often. You know, it's easier for her to go, that's Portland, than it would be for him.
Totally. Yes. And again, it's fine. It's fine.
No, we'll never say anything, but just in my mind, I go, oh, yeah, that's why she gets there first.
For sure.
You know, having similar visions. So later, we will use these as both obstacle, maybe advantage. Do we, you know, trick Zod and the others? The only reason I'm
going to have to dash out really quickly. My child is calling. I'm the only parent in the house at the moment, and
oh no, that's all right. Well, we're calling it, and thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Bye.